Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our On Conversation session. We'll be talking about increasing customer demand and how that requires accelerated 3PL operations. My name is Maddie Pierce. I am a manager of our facilitation team here at SPS Commerce. I'm very excited to be here today to talk about this topic. I have a couple housekeeping items before we dive into the meat and potatoes of today's conversation. There is a Q&A box at the very bottom of your Zoom webinar here today. You will have some opportunities to ask questions. During this, I will be facilitating that with Jim Frome. So please do enter in those questions during the presentation or afterwards as well. We'd love to hear from you and your questions and thoughts. Before we get started in today's session, we do have a poll for you because we're curious. We're curious about some things. And so we're going to launch that poll here to get started. I'm curious, which of the following is the most difficult part of being a 3PL? Make a choice, make a selection. Is it getting that consistent item data, working with different data types, labels and shipping requirements, time to get those customers up and running, changes in packing and shipping requirements, and scaling up and down capacity with the changing customer demand? Let's see what we think out there. What is the most difficult part of being a 3PL? Cast your votes. We'll leave it open for a couple more seconds here so you can get in your ideas, your thoughts, and we'll review what the results are here in just a moment. Let's see them as they flood in. Those results will show up here in just a moment. Let's see what everyone has selected. Okay. So we've got a variety of answers here. The clear front runner here is that scaling up and down the capacity with the changing customer demand. And this is something that we're going to talk more about. It's needed to evolve their business as customers change. And we talk about the fact that the solution is scalable, but we don't really cover off on capacity changes and the impact of the 3PL in this webinar today. So again, bring in those questions, but we did have some high percentages as well with some other those topics as well. So very excited to dive into our topic today. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce our guest for today's session, our President and Chief Operating Officer here at SPS Commerce, Jim Frome. Let's give Jim a warm welcome.
All right. Well, thanks, Maddie. Thought I'd just get started by zeroing in on our opinion, which I'm sure most on this call would agree with, is that, look, running a 3PL business is complex. But thought I'd focus, on the pain that we think we are suited to help 3PLs with. And that, look, 3PLs have a complex business. Each of their customers is very unique. Each customer has their own items. Those items can change over time, either based on cycling out the old and cycling in the new, or possibly they change by season, or in the case of even apparel, products come and go for multiple seasons and don't even come back. Those customers are different. They all have their own customers, which might be different from customer to customer based on who their customers are. Many businesses have multiple ways they fulfill to their customers, whether that's a B2C fulfillment model or a wholesale model where you're dealing with wholesale quantities. Depending on who they do business with, they also have unique business rules they need to follow in terms of how their shipments need to be picked and packed and labeled, how what information might need to be exchanged to keep their end customer in the loop as to the status. And every customer has their own business systems, data, and every customer's customer is also putting pressure on them to follow their data formats and business rules as well. So being a 3PL for one customer can get very complicated, but obviously most 3PLs have several customers, and every time you add a customer, it just adds to that complexity, because customer number 2 obviously has different products than customer number 1. They're probably working with different customers than customer number 1. Based on those customers, everything else can be different. as the requirements roll downhill from those customers, you add a third, you add a fourth, and pretty quickly that complexity can really build on itself. And as you do that, especially if you have multiple locations, that can be a big challenge. Customer one is maybe doing certain fulfillment models with a certain subset of their customers out of your west location. Maybe they're in your east location, but they're using that to service a different customer or a different fulfillment model. Customer two might be in both, might be in one, might be in the other, and they're servicing different customers, and so on as you get into 3 or 4. But keeping track of all this, doing it well, managing all the different requirements that can happen just in this little picture here, at some point doing it efficiently can become a big challenge as you add customers, locations, and grow your business as a 3PL. One of the ways to look at, well, how do you get an A at doing what you need to get done? In a lot of ways, you've actually got to be an expert in potentially 3 unique parties. Obviously, you as the 3PL need to know your business, what you guys do that makes you unique, whether that's the product category you support or the regions your warehouses are located, or whatever your secret sauce is around your systems. You've obviously got to understand your customer's business as well, because they are really the company you're working on behalf of. And then a lot of times being an expert in your customer means you got to actually be an expert in what your customer's customer requires. If you've got a customer that is shipping to Home Depot and Lowe's and maybe Menards, each of those 3 retailers have unique requirements that those customers of yours need to follow, and they're all different. And so how do you get an A in there? Whether that requirement is what they require from your customer in terms of data, what they require from your customer in terms of how their orders are picked and packed, possibly what the routing guide says you can use in terms of carriers, and even maybe what variances are allowed in terms of being in a certain range of the right quantities for each of the items you're shipping, and what windows you can have in terms of your ship timeliness. So a lot going on here, but in a lot of ways, getting an A in what you do means knowing your business, knowing your customer's business, and actually even knowing your customer's customer business in order to serve your customers at the level that you need to. On top of that is just dealing with the constant change. Once you have a customer, that relationship with that customer is not static. Those customers are frequently cycling in and out of their products. They're changing it by the seasons. They might be adding a new customer that they're asking you to help them pick, pack, and ship to. Those customers have their own new sets of business rules that maybe didn't apply to some of their previous customers. Those changes could require additional item information, or possibly it even causes them to want to add items themselves to your warehouse because that new customer orders some of the items that maybe the previous customers didn't order. Obviously, sometimes they lose customers, so how do you scale that down? And then maybe they're working with an existing customer, but that customer adds a new way that they want to have their items shipped, a new fulfillment model, or they make changes to the rules of a model that you've been servicing for a period of time. So these things are not static. Your customer's businesses change, and your customer's business change. And that is a constant thing that on top of everything we've talked about, you've also got to stay on top of to serve the customer the way you want to. At the same time, demand for 3PLs is not going down, it is going up, but also that demand is increasing in complexity. One of the trends that we see, and has definitely been a trend big time here in the last couple of years, is that a lot of the key retailers, even some of the B2C marketplaces, are increasingly trying to deliver on a seamless omni-channel experience to their end consumers, which is putting a lot of pressure on the companies whose products you're responsible for pick, packing, and shipping. That pressure is causing people to constantly rethink where they're putting their inventory, often closer to the end consumer, which is creating a demand for 3PLs, but also a more complex set of item data requirements and fulfillment models that also need to be more fluid. Maybe you're getting a warehouse order one day from a certain retailer that is you're shipping to on behalf of your supplier customer, and then at the same time you might even be getting a drop ship order for a different item from that same retailer. So good news is the demand is going up, but the bar on the complexity is increasing at the same time, which adds some fuel to the fire. We like to call this the endless cycle of manual management. You onboard a new customer to a certain scenario, you got to figure out what's going to be required to get an A on that scenario, not just from what do you got to train your staff to understand about how to do that for that customer, but what data might need to go back and forth between you and that customer, so that the customer stays in sync with you and you in sync with your customer. But often that data is also influenced by, is your customer going to need to get some data from you to satisfy their end customer? Those requirements can change. Their processes could change. Their customer's process can change. And it's just a constant cycle of trying to keep on top of that, managing the change, and make sure things are where they need to be. And obviously, as you add customers, you get a picture that, this I think is a pretty complicated picture. It probably doesn't do justice to what you, the 3PL, need to do to actually get an A with your customers. But obviously, over time, this can be a pretty hairy situation to keep on top of and make sure that you're managing those changes and the information exchanges and the changes in routing guides and things, so that you are in lockstep sync with what your customers' business needs. And often that is driven by their customers' business needs as well. So at SPS, we think we've got an easier way to help you get through some of that pain. We have a product called SPS for 3PLs. And in a lot of ways, it starts by knowing what each of your end customers' expectations are. As a business, this is what SPS Commerce is all about. Over 20 years, we have been making it a point to work with virtually every North American retailer, distributor, and grocer, pure play e-tailers, e-commerce systems that frequently are the branded website of those companies, and marketplaces, which is another B2C model where these customers may be attempting to sell their product, and really codifying those requirements into what we consider our most valuable IP, which we call our rule books. Those rule books keep track of, for each of these companies, for each of their fulfillment models, for each of their channels, what is the data and information exchange that's required to properly fulfill an order and communicate status during that process. It also codifies the business processes that are part of that relationship, from what are allowed variances, what are the routing guide requirements, what are the pick, packing, and, palletizing and labeling requirements that each of those companies have. And with, who at those companies you need to work with if you have any questions, or if something goes wrong, how do you fix it quickly? And so that is really what the SPS Commerce business is about. Over our last 22 years, we have built up a large business that spans all product categories: hard lines, soft lines, apparel, and grocery. We have implemented over 15,000 connections between our customers and 3PLs. We have worked with over 3,500 North American retailers, distributors, and grocers and e-tailers that make up the lion's share of what is in those rule books that we consider our most valuable IP. We have onboarded over 100,000 suppliers. Those would be companies whose product you would be pick, packing, and shipping to their end customers. Some of those suppliers are legitimate suppliers to retailers and distributors, for example, but they can also be their own merchant of record for their e-commerce sites and when they are selling their product themselves on marketplaces. Over the years, that's been over 1 million integrations between your customers and their customers, along with the 3PLs that are involved with that. We've integrated over 400 systems. And so, we've got a lot of expertise here. We've built up a lot of knowledge and valuable IP in the marketplace that we think sets us up uniquely well to provide that insight from those rule books that I talked about on the previous slide. As a result of that, we are able to provide companies a single point of integration whereby they can standardize a connection, in this case, a 3PL to SPS Commerce, which puts us in the position then for us to do the legwork and heavy lifting behind the scenes to take on the nuances of what each of your customers' unique requirements are that may be an ingredient into helping you get an A with your customer in terms of what they need to do around data exchange between you and them, how to understand how any of these companies have rules in place about how they want their orders shipped to them and packed and labeled, so that that burden can be taken off of both you and your customer by tapping into what we have built over the past 22 years. That solution is obviously battle tested across all those companies I mentioned before, and I'll go into a bit more detail on that solution here in a minute, but I thought I'd set up how to maybe think about the solution first, which is step one, doing the effort to standardize and automate the information exchange between you and each of your customers, as well as providing those customers with a suite of options that allow them to exchange that information with you based on what their capabilities are. Second, helping accelerate the onboarding of those customers to your environment. And then third, once those relationships are up and running, the proactive work we provide to make sure that it continues to work beyond the initial implementation, but also as things change on almost a daily basis, either on your side, with your customer, or with your customer's customer, so that you don't have to wait for something to break to find out something changed, but rely on us to provide you the proactive insight to allow you to keep those changes in sync, to protect you, protect your customer in working with their customers. So we'll dive into the details on the product itself. First, on the kind of getting up and running by creating a standard and automated way to share that information. We'll start first with you. Everything we do is designed to integrate with your WMS, whether that's your WMS or your WMSs. If you might have multiple locations that are actually being run on different warehouse management systems. We do the work up front to integrate a standard way for all of your suppliers, all of your customers, to give you the item data you need from your customers, to receive their order information, to return back to them whatever they need in terms of shipment and inventory data, and to also give you access to any of the labels that you might need to put on the packages, whether those are barcode labels that a distributor might use to scan into their inventory upon receipt at their DC, or possibly a packing slip for a consumer shipment. Give you access to those as if you were your customer in a way that you can quickly get those labels and put them into the natural workflow of you putting together your customer shipments. So that's step one. It's a standard way for you to get all that information back and forth between you and your customer. Second is then give you the option about how much of what we have you can take advantage of. The product scales very cleanly with the ability to start with just one fulfillment model, or scale all the way to the multiple fulfillment models we support. So we have defined modules for B2C shipments when your customer is the merchant of record and just shipping orders to the consumers that bought the items off their branded website or bought off of a marketplace. There is a third party B2C module where maybe they are shipping consumer shipments, but the merchant of record is Walmart.com or HomeDepot.com. And so you do have the retailer rulebook involved in that scenario. And then the wholesale shipments, whether those are pallets going to a distribution center or possibly a store, could be cross-stocking where your customer actually needs to pre-pack the wholesale shipment by final destination. We have models available for grocery as well. So there are both consumer fulfillment models and wholesale models. Depending on what makes the sense for your business, you can start with one of them, all of them, start with one and grow over time, maybe as your business adds some of those. Or you add customers that tap into those capabilities the first time. And then lastly is the locations. If you have multiple locations, you can start with just one of the locations and add a second and third location later, or obviously start with multiple locations right out of the bat, depending on what makes the most sense for your business. But first and foremost, we start with you, the 3PL, to understand, based on your business, based on your capabilities, based on your product category, and based on who your customers are, how do we create a standard way across all of your customers to receive their item information, orders, return back to them whatever shipping and inventory information they need, and to provide you access to their labels in your warehouse for the final step of packing those orders on behalf of your customer. Once that is in place, we also have a suite of capabilities we provide to your customers to take into account where they are and what their preferences are. We provide a portal that allows that item information, those orders, to be sent to you from your vendor straight into your warehouse management system. That portal is also where they would see any shipping and inventory information you need to provide back to them. If your customer would prefer to send that data directly and receive it directly through an API, that is available, or via EDI. In some cases, a customer might use one of these for the item data, one of these for an order, and one of these for the label. So It doesn't necessarily need to be an all or nothing across these things. Your customers can even mix and match these methods based on the information exchange, but this is designed to meet your customer where their preferences and capabilities are. If they have the ability to send you this data directly through a direct connection on their side into your WMS, then that's what we will use with them to facilitate that exchange. If they are maybe a low volume, low tech customer, then they'll probably opt for the portal option. So again, this is designed to give your customers an easy and preferred way based on who they are and where they are in their tech journey to get this information back and forth with you in the way that they prefer. And then lastly, giving you direct access to their labels when needed. So that barcode label might be a label to Home Depot for customer A. It provides you the ability, again, through a portal where you can print these things, through an API where you can access these things directly. Again, we've got the IP that knows what all of these companies need in terms of their labels and what they ask of each of your customers, depending on how those items would be fulfilled, so that we can generate these things and give them to you directly, so that you have no miss on your side in terms of getting these into the packages or on the pallets when you're shipping on behalf of your customers to customers where this kind of thing is required. Next, I'll cover the accelerating the onboarding. And this would be the ability we have and the capability we have that when you add a new customer, how we can get them up and running on your behalf and do the legwork so you don't have to. So first of all, we have a large team here whose job it is to basically onboard customers to new trading relationships. That's kind of what the SPS Commerce machine does behind the scenes. And so we do have the staffing to, on your behalf, when you sign up a new customer, to do the reach out to them, understand what their capabilities are, who their customers are, the knowledge to know based on those scenarios, what information may or may not be required as part of that handshake between you and them around orders and shipments and labels, as well as make sure that the expertise we have around routing guides and shipping windows and things, both you and your customer are aware of those things to get out of the gate quickly and successfully. And then we will actually do the implementation as well. Make sure that we've got those orders, we're exchanging that information between you and your customer and back again, and make sure that the technology bugs and things have been worked out before you go live. So that is part of our solution as well, isn't to just provide you and your customer the technology that allows you to do this in a scalable, standard way that meets your needs as the 3PLs and meets the customer's capabilities, but also do the work of actually getting that technology implemented between you and your customer, so you don't have to do that and worry about it, as well as providing the information around what that particular trading relationship may require in terms of the business rules. Lastly, the maintain and support. So again, once these connections are up and running, we manage them. We're making sure that the data is going back and forth properly. If all of a sudden errors start occurring, we jump in and try to figure out, okay, what's going on? Is it on one side or another, or maybe the customer's customer order from came in wrong in the first place, and maybe that's the place that needs to be fixed. Since those retail and customer endpoint rule books are our most important IP, we are constantly monitoring for them changing. If Walmart, for example, changes some of the fields they need on their advanced ship notice, we're the first ones to typically know it. We make that change in our system, and then it ripples through any other trading relationship that might be affected, including those between you and your customers, so that those things are managed in a proactive manner versus a reactive manner. As your customers stay with you over time, there's going to be change there. They're going to need to add more items if they pick up more customers, or their existing customers end up carrying more of their data. And so we make sure that the implementation we have between you and that customer facilitates those extra items being exchanged properly. If they add a new fulfillment model, then we make sure that that new fulfillment model is incorporated as part of that existing relationship, and the handshake for what is needed in that kind of purchase order, for example, what might be required in terms of the shipping information that goes back to your customers so they can update their inventory and maybe provide whatever is required to their end customer in terms of data, is part of that, and any labels that occur. As your customers add new customers, how do we make sure that those new connections work as well? So this is an ongoing effort. It's not, hey, here's the tech, turn it on, now you got something to manage. We're really talking here about a full service capability that provides you the tech, your supplier the tech, provides the resources to get new things implemented, and also is the resources monitoring it around the clock and proactively incorporating those changes as they may occur, and making sure things, if bugs and errors are occurring, that we jump in and take control of figuring out where those things happening and doing what we can to make them repaired. Lastly, given our large customer base, we are frequently asked by, quote, our supplier customers if we can make or point them in the direction of any 3PLs. Pretty typical conversation is, hey, we need some inventory space in this part of the country or in this town or this state. Do you know any 3PLs who are located in that region, support my product category, support the way I need to pick, pack, and ship, and maybe even have some experience with my customer? And so part of what is a byproduct of working with us is we can frequently recommend 3PLs we know and know well to our large customer base, and bring you potentially new business as part of this partnership as well. Lastly, I'll just kind of wrap up things from a summary here before we go into the Q&A. But the SPS Commerce for 3PL solution is really designed to, one, standardize the way you get and exchange this information with your customers, so you've got one standard way for all of your customers, as well as providing your customers whatever they need, meeting them at where they are and what their preferences are, with the way to exchange that information back and forth in a way that works for them as well. Second, we've got broad coverage across all product categories, across all sales channels, item data that might need be exchanged for consumer shipments, as well as wholesale shipments and dimensions that help out your WMS. We've got fulfillment models that span pretty much any way a company today is shipping, whether it's via a B2C relationship or a B2B relationship. A track record of working with virtually every North American retailer, grocer, distributor, the most popular e-commerce systems your customers use to sell online, and the most popular marketplaces where your customers may be selling online, as well as deep experience in working with 3PLs in all of those relationships I just described. And then lastly, a complete full service solution, not just selling you some technology, your suppliers technology they can use with you, but also doing the work to work with your customers on your behalf to figure out what their capabilities are, what their data exchange requirements may or may not be with you based on who they do business with, and to do the work to get them up and running. And then once up and running, proactively managing, keeping it running and making the changes before things break or change wherever possible. So that's kind of a brief overview here of what we wanted to cover in terms of the pain points the 3PLs have that we address, background on our approach, why we think we've got some unique capabilities in the marketplace to help you be successful with your customers based on the number of your customers we may already have as joint customers, but also providing the insight into your customers' customers that can help you get up and running quicker with them successfully, and obviously maintain that relationship in sync as those requirements with customers change or they add new customers over time. So with that, I will turn it back over to Maddie, and we'll head into the Q&A portion of the webinar.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim. Great to learn all of those things about the pain points, the approach, and the insight that we can have for our customers. We'll begin with some questions. So if you haven't submitted a question yet and you've got a question, please use that icon at the very bottom, the Q&A icon, and we'll be answering questions from that. So our first question today, some of our customers only have e-commerce orders. Would we be able to use this for those customers as well, or only the ones for big box retailers?
The answer is yes. So the product itself is modularized by fulfillment. So for example, if you're a 3PL and you only have one location and all you do is e-commerce orders, then that would be the modules that you would use for the SPS for 3PL solution. The other ones wouldn't be of any interest to you, at least not now, until you maybe got into some of the other fulfillment models, if that's where someday you think you might take your business. So again, it's very modularized by fulfillment model. It's also modularized by location. So if you have multiple locations, and maybe one of them is purely e-commerce fulfillment location, then that would be a way to get started with just the e-commerce orders, and you wouldn't have to worry about the other locations or fulfillment models.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Jim. Fantastic answer there, expanding into those fulfillment models. I have another question coming at us here. Can we integrate the information from the portal into our WMS system? Is that possible?
Yes, that's almost the assumption, is that in order for this to be valuable to you, that the item data, the order data would go right into your WMS, and then anything that you would need to share back with your customer, like the shipping or inventory updates, would come directly out of your WMS. On top of that, we create a standard pipe in and out of your system so that you don't have to build a unique integration for each customer. You build a unique integration for you, and then we work with your suppliers to help them get their data into your format so that you can end up with a much more scalable solution. After you do the first one, you do number one, that's probably not a whole lot different than any other way, but the first time you did it, you get to reuse it the second, third, and fourth time across all of your customers, which really gets that scale and that efficiency we talk about. As you add more customers, those customers have more complex requirements over time, be it more customers, more fulfillment models, and your world is much more simplified versus trying to build one-off connections for every relationship you have.
I love that. Thank you. That is fantastic to know that we have that capability and that scalability with us. So on to our next question. I did get another one here about some label requirements. So do I need to store and keep up to date label requirements through a solution like Bartender if I need retailer labels?
No, you would not need to. So as part of that IP I've been talking about, we have built out, if it's a requirement of a retailer to include a certain type of packing slip or a certain type of barcode label that frequently is used to help them receive the shipment into their inventory system or WMS, those are things that we have been building out for years, and in most cases, a retailer has a standard and all the suppliers have to follow it. And we have a label solution that has all of those already built out for virtually every North American retailer, grocer, and distributor. And if you bring us a customer who happens to work with somebody we haven't worked with before, we will build it out just like we built out all the other 3,500 we've had, because we want to make sure that we've got 100% coverage. So we build it out as a product that isn't a one-off for us. And those labels are delivered to you either through that portal, and they will show up matching the data that went frequently in the ASN that produces those labels. And it'll be a label for Home Depot from your customer for what that shipment was that you just packed. That'll either pop up in the portal that you can print and then start labeling, or you can tap the API for the labels and receive those things that route as well. And that works for both, like I said, sort of wholesale labels, but also if that retailer is also doing a drop ship environment, they frequently have a standard way to put a packing slip in the consumer shipment, and the label service does those as well.
Great information on labels. Such a big requirement. So I know there's lots of thoughts around that. So thank you for offering up some thoughts on that as well. We did get another question here, kind of rounding out some ASN conversations. The comment was, thank you for the information on getting additional information in and out of our WMS. So that definitely resonated with those of us on the session today. The question is, are there alternatives for sending an ASN directly to a retailer on the customer's behalf?
Usually the retailer wants to receive it from the supplier. That's who they're holding accountable, quote, as the vendor of record. And in a lot of cases, the retailer system won't work because they have to have the order, any other information, including the ASN, matched to the same trading partner ID. So typically the way we solve that problem with this solution is if that trading relationship that your customer has is with a retailer who requires an ASN, that influences what the data requirements are when you provide them with the shipment update. If they're shipping to somebody that doesn't want an ASN, in all likelihood, all your customer really needs to know is how many items of each, what is the quantities of all the items I ship? So they either know you A, shipped it, and B, they can update their inventory to reflect what just went out the door. If the retailer requires an ASN, your customer probably needs the data I just said, and then they need whatever data that you produced in the picking and packing process in addition to that, so they can drop it into an ASN on their side and ship it to their end customer. And so that is the scenario that I guess we typically see and typically solve for, in part because that's how most retailers end up having to get that ASN data because of how their system works around trading partner IDs.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, it's great to get a little behind the scenes peek too of how retailers are thinking, especially with that advanced ship notice requirement.
And then we need that information to produce that label I just talked about a few minutes ago. So it also, if you do it that way, then we're in the loop and we can produce the labels as well.
Yeah, it's great. It's amazing how it all, of course, ties together. We do have another question here. Again, keep submitting your questions. If you do have something at top of mind, we'd love to get those questions answered for you. So here's our next question. How soon could we get a non-EDI customer up and running on this portal?
Well, if they use the portal, about all they have to do is, typically what we do is we would reach out to them on your behalf after you've signed them up. We would find out, do they have a way, or do they want to, if they have a way, to do a direct electronic handshake with you via an API or EDI? And if they're like, no, we just want to use the portal, then it becomes a really more of a training exercise of how they sign in, see what item data you need of theirs to populate your warehouse management system, and learn what data you need for a order that's usually based on fulfillment model. So if they're just doing a consumer shipment, those are pretty simple. The template for giving you the order information is a lot easier than if it's a full-blown wholesale purchase order, which tend to have a lot more items and quantities and multiple ship tos and other information. But in general, if they don't have the ability to send you and receive data via APIs or EDI, it is a training exercise on the portal that has been hooked up to your WMS. If it's somebody who does have those things and wants to use them, then frequently we can get those handshakes working in 15 to 30 days, depending on how fast the customer can move on their side in terms of, basically going through a testing process with us to make sure that the data goes from them to you in their format and there are no more errors.
It's great to know about the process. What does that next step look like potentially, and the setup timelines as well. So thank you for diving into a little bit more detail there, Jim.
Appreciate everybody taking the time out today to listen to us for 50 minutes. Hopefully you learned something. And obviously, if you have any interest in learning more, let us know. We'll be more than happy to take that next step with you. All right, everyone have a great day, and maybe we'll see each other in the near future. Thanks.